Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at another disturbing case with you. What happens when a psychopath beats, rapes, and murders women and children for decades without consequences? Peter Tobin lived as if he had the license to kill, repeatedly getting away with awful crimes. He once boasted about killing up to 48 women. But despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt, he never officially admitted to his crimes or provided closure to the victims' families. This is a case so heartbreaking that it becomes infuriating. Our love and respect goes out to all those who knew and loved Vicky Hamilton, Dina, McNichol, and Angelika Kluk, and all those affected by this case. Born on August 27, 1946 in Johnstone, Scotland, Peter Britton Tobin was the youngest of 8 children. He was described as a bit wild by one of his brothers and considered a delinquent by his family. By age 7, he was sent to a reform school because he was uncontrollably violent and disregarded rules. In the early 1960s, Tobin spent time in a borstal, a type of youth detention center in the United Kingdom, for minor offenses. These institutions were often filled with abuse, and it is believed that Tobin likely victimized others during his time there. At age 22, Tobin married his girlfriend, 17-year-old Margaret Mountney, humorous and a gentleman. We courted for a few weeks before he took me to meet his mother and father in Paisley. They were elderly and frail but very polite, and it confirmed what I thought. This is it. I found the man of my dreams. But this dream would soon turn into a nightmare. He treated Margaret like a slave and subjected her to severe physical and sexual abuse, including repeated beatings, confinement, and rape at knife point. Their marriage lasted only a year. One disturbing incident involved their pet puppy, Butte. Margaret recounted in an interview that Tobin was annoyed by the dog's barking. What happened next is something Margaret couldn't even imagine. Butte had been brutally killed and dismembered with his body parts scattered in their yard. Shockingly, she even found boys in the yard using its head as a football. When Margaret was distraught about this, Tobin responded with brutal violence. He punched her hard in the stomach and then raped her while holding a serrated knife to her throat. He then inserted the knife inside her and cut her internally. The violence was so extreme that blood seeped through the floor, alerting downstairs tenants who called the police. Margaret spent weeks in the hospital recovering from her injuries. The trauma she endured was so severe that it left her infertile. Despite the gravity of the assault, Margaret was too terrified of Tobin to file a complaint with the police. She finally escaped the marriage when Tobin was sentenced to 5 years in prison for forgery and burglary in 1970. Suffice to say, had Tobin not been arrested, Margaret would have ended up as one of his murder victims. Margaret said, "People think you must be stupid to get involved with a man like that. But men like Tobin are clever. They draw you in, and they only show their hand when you're under their control. And as we'll soon see, she won't be the only woman he manages to trick." Tobin served half of his sentence and was released in early 1973. Within weeks of his release, he had relocated to Brighton and married Sylvia Jeffries, a 30-year-old nurse. Tobin had taken a job for the city's water department, in which he was trained in digging trenches, a skill he would use for nefarious reasons later on. Like Margaret, she was attracted to Tobin's polite and well-mannered act. However, history repeated itself. He treated Sylvia like a slave. Tobin's abusive behavior once again extended to the couple's pet dog, which he would assault and swing around by its collar. Sylvia herself was subjected to regular beatings, violent rape, and death threats, leaving her with permanent injuries. She also remembered Tobin holding a knife to her neck and shouting, "I'm gonna kill you." The couple had 2 children, a son, Ian, and a daughter, who died in birth. In 1976, after 3 years of abuse, Sylvia managed to escape the marriage with the help of a women's refuge. She left with only 2 bags and a pushchair. Sylvia said, "I knew I had to get away or he would have killed me. I left with nothing. I was terrified Pete would come after me, and for a while I felt like I was always looking over my shoulder." In a measure of the evidence of abuse she had amassed, she won a lifelong injunction against Tobin, ever contacting or approaching her or their son again. Following his separation from Sylvia, Tobin's whereabouts became unclear for almost a decade. police were unable to trace his movements during this time. It is believed that he may have joined a motorcycle club called the Rising Sun and lived a nomadic life. This is a period of his life where he may have committed other unsolved crimes as well. Tobin used many tactics to evade detection and stay anonymous throughout his life. He's believed to have used over 40 aliases, resided in more than 20 different locations, used 40 different phone numbers, and operated over 150 vehicles to travel and cover his tracks. In 1984, Tobin resurfaced in Portsmouth, Hampshire. Here, an 8-year-old girl reported being repeatedly abused by him over several months. Although police were notified, Tobin was not prosecuted due to insufficient evidence. In 1986, Tobin, then 40 years old, met 16-year-old Kathy Wilson in Brighton. Within 3 weeks, she was living with him. Tobin's pattern of targeting younger women likely served two purposes: to control his partners due to the age gap and skewed power dynamics, and to satisfy his attraction to children and young women who would later become his victims. Shortly after meeting, Kathy was pregnant. He conned her into getting pregnant by telling her he was about to have an operation that would leave him infertile. But once she was pregnant, he had changed. Later, she gave birth to a son, Daniel. In August 1989, the couple married and moved to a house in West Lothian, Scotland. In this home, Kathy endured severe abuse. In a 2022 interview, she recounted, "Throwing his dinner at me, putting his hands around my throat became routine. I was his slave. Even when I went into labor, he refused to take me to hospital and said I'd cooked a roast dinner for him and some friends. I was scared to cross him and felt completely tied." Kathy reported that Tobin would verbally abuse her, calling her unimaginable names. She was banned from leaving the house, and rarely was she left alone. He used her to fulfill his depraved sexual fantasies and regularly brought home prostitutes, forcing Kathy to watch as he assaulted, hit, gagged, and strangled these women. He also threatened to murder their son. Recognizing the danger she was in, Kathy began secretly saving money. In April 1990, she managed to collect enough money to flee across the border into England with Daniel, eventually settling in Portsmouth. This decision likely saved her life. Tobin's first confirmed victim was 15-year-old Vicky Hamilton, last seen on February 10, 1991, at a bus stop in Bathgate, Scotland, less than a mile from Tobin's residence. While the exact circumstances remain unknown, it is believed that Tobin offered Vicky a lift, drove her to his house, and attacked and killed her. Due to the nearly 2-decade delay in discovering her remains, the exact cause of death could not be determined. But evidence suggests she was beaten, abused, and strangled. Tobin hid Vicky's body in an upstairs bedroom. When he relocated to Margate, Kent, he dismembered her body, wrapping the parts in curtains and bin bags. On March 21, 1991, he drove approximately 500 miles to his new property at 50 Irvine Drive with her remains. A neighbor witnessed Tobin digging a hole in the garden, which he claimed was for a sandpit for his son. The neighbor later saw the hole filled in, unaware it was Vicky's burial site. Just 6 months later, Tobin claimed his second victim, 18-year-old Dina McNichol. Dina, a sixth-form student from Tillingham, Essex, was last seen alive on August 5, 1991. She was hitchhiking home with her boyfriend, David Tremlett, from a music festival in Liphook, Hampshire. Dina had recently passed 4 A-levels and was enjoying a summer of relaxation before the next phase of her life. Tobin picked up the couple. He dropped David off first. David invited Dina to his house, but she declined, wanting to get home. After that, she was never seen alive again. Like Vicky, Dina's remains were not discovered for almost 2 decades. Forensic evidence revealed she had been drugged, gagged, and bound with her hands tied behind her back. She was then abused and murdered. The location of Dina's murder is unclear, but Tobin wrapped her body in bin bags and buried it in the garden, just a few feet away from Vicky's remains. In 1993, Tobin relocated to Havant, Hampshire, ostensibly to be near his son Daniel, who was living in Portsmouth with his mother, Kathy Wilson. Despite Kathy's desire to have no contact with Tobin, she allowed Daniel to visit his father occasionally. She did not know that he had brought a dead body with him from Scotland, nor that he would abduct another young woman, still with Daniel's child seat in the back of the car, while returning from dropping the toddler back with his mother. On August 4, 1993, Tobin used his son to lure two 14-year-old girls to his flat under the pretense of offering them a babysitting job. Once inside, Tobin threatened the girls with a knife, bound them, and forced them to take drugs that made them drowsy. He then did the unthinkable to them. This heinous act occurred while his son Daniel, approximately 3 or 4 years old at the time, was in another room. When Daniel interrupted, Tobin turned on the gas in the house, returned his son to Kathy, and disappeared. Miraculously, after 5 hours in the gas-filled home, one of the girls managed to escape and alert the police. A manhunt ensued for Tobin, who was now using the alias Peter Wilson. He hid in a religious community called the Jesus Fellowship. The crime and Tobin's photograph were featured on the BBC program Crime Watch. The religious community recognized Tobin and contacted the police, leading to his arrest. On May 18, 1994, at Winchester Crown Court, Tobin pleaded guilty to raping and abusing the two girls and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Authorities believed they had incarcerated a dangerous sex offender, unaware that Tobin had already killed at least 2 young women and would continue to kill upon his release. Tobin was freed in 2004 at age 58 and returned to Scotland, settling in Paisley near his birthplace. Due to the nature of his conviction, Tobin was required to regularly check in with the police. However, he soon disappeared, and in November 2005, an arrest warrant was issued when he moved out of Paisley without notifying authorities. Tobin employed his evasion skills and, using the alias Pat McLaughlin, relocated to Glasgow, approximately 12 miles away. By September 2006, Tobin was working as a handyman at St. Patrick's Church in Anderston, central Glasgow, under the alias Pat McLaughlin. It was here that he encountered his last known victim, Angelika Kluk, a 23-year-old Polish national. Angelica was working as a cleaner at the church to finance her Scandinavian studies at university. Angelica was last seen alive in Tobin's company on September 24, 2006. Known for her conscientious and reliable nature, her absence from work prompted a police call. After an extensive search, Angelica's body was discovered on September 29, 5 days after her disappearance. She was found buried in an underground chamber beneath the church floor, near the confessional, hidden under a tarpaulin. The autopsy revealed that Angelica had been raped, severely beaten, and stabbed 16 times. Her hands were bound behind her back. Investigators believe that Angelica may have still been alive, albeit briefly, when her body was placed under the floorboards, where she ultimately bled to death. Fingerprints at the scene revealed that Pat McLaughlin was, in fact, Tobin. By this time, Tobin had fled to London, prompting a nationwide manhunt. On October 1, 2006, Tobin went to a London hospital for a heart issue and provided a fake name. But his plan failed when he was recognized from police alerts and arrested. During questioning, Tobin remained uncooperative and provided no information to the police. Fortunately, the police had gathered overwhelming forensic evidence against him. So, Tobin was charged with her murder within 6 days of his arrest. This was an end to his gruesome spree of violence. Tobin pleaded not guilty to murdering and raping Angelica, but was convicted of both charges at the High Court in Edinburgh following a 6-week trial from March 23 to May 4, 2007. Tobin was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 21 years before parole eligibility. Following Tobin's incarceration, Operation Anagram was established in 2006 to trace his movements throughout his life and potentially link him to unsolved murders. This initiative was partly motivated by Tobin's claim in prison to have killed 48 people, although there was no evidence for it. The investigation led police to search Tobin's former property on Robertson Avenue in Bathgate, where they found Vicky's DNA. They went on to search his property in Margate. On November 14, 2007, police recovered Vicky's remains, and 2 days later, they discovered Dina's body, allowing both women to receive proper burials almost 20 years after their murders. Tobin was tried separately for the murders of Vicky and Dina. Despite overwhelming evidence, including his DNA on the body's wrappings, Tobin pleaded not guilty in both cases. On December 2, 2008, Tobin was found guilty of Vicky's murder at the High Court in Dundee. The judge sentenced him to a minimum of 30 years in custody, emphasizing the evil nature of his crime. For Dina's murder, Tobin was tried at Chelmsford Crown Court. On December 16, 2009, after just 13 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Tobin guilty. Justice Calvert-Smith imposed a whole life order, stating, "The mandatory life sentence in this case has to be accompanied by a whole life order." These sentences effectively ensured that Tobin would spend the remainder of his life in prison. The system finally did what they should have done years ago. Tobin was incarcerated at HMP Edinburgh, where he faced some retribution for his crimes. On July 1, 2015, he was attacked with a razor blade while sleeping, resulting in a 20 cm long scar on his face and neck. By October 2022, Tobin's health had significantly deteriorated due to cancer, and he was transferred to the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary. Despite his vulnerable state, chained to a hospital bed and dying alone, police made a final plea for Tobin to reveal details of other murders he might have committed. However, he remained silent. On October 8, 2022, at the age of 76, the serial killer and rapist died in the hospital. No one claimed his body, so he was cremated and his ashes scattered at sea. Police investigated Tobin's potential connection to over 15 unsolved murders and disappearances of young women and children across the UK, Ireland, and Scotland. While some cases seemed unlikely to be linked to Tobin, at least two appeared probable. Louise Kay, 18, disappeared on June 24, 1988, after planning to sleep in her car at Beachy Head, Eastbourne, East Sussex. Her body and gold Ford Fiesta were never found. Tobin was known to be working in Eastbourne at the time and was reportedly trying to sell a hand-painted car. Jessie Earle, 22, vanished in Eastbourne between mid-May 1980. Her skeletonized remains were found a year later, bound with her own bra. Tobin had lived and worked near where Jessie disappeared, but no evidence links Tobin to any other murders of young girls or children. His ex-wife, Kathy Wilson, said, "The thing he most enjoyed was having power and total control. Everyone knows there were other victims, and he could have made all the difference in the world to grieving families who still don't know for sure what happened to their loved ones." Vicky's siblings Sharon, Lee, and Lindsay paid tribute to her laughter, her smile. They added, "If Tobin has taken more victims, our hearts go out to their families, and we can only wish one day they get the closure they so badly deserve. We will not be celebrating any passing, but instead we'll be remembering Vicky, Angelica, and Dina, along with any other victims, and we respectfully ask for others to do the same." With his death, Tobin has taken all his secrets to the grave and left many cases unsolved and families without closure. What are your thoughts about this case? Do you think Tobin had more victims that we don't know about? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more videos like this, please be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime videos. Stay safe out there and see you in the next one.